I'm sitting here in front of the most impressive array of opera stars, and not only just in any repertoire, but especially in Richard Strauss. The purpose of our discussion is, of course, FRAU and SCHATTEN. We start first, Miss Rysanek. Now, how long have you been associated with your role as the Kaiserin, as the Empress?
Well, since '53. This was the first in Munich. I think it was the first FRAU ever after the war.
I see.
And I fell immediately with the part in love, with Kaiserin, vocally.
Yes.
But I don't think I was a good acting-wise. It's not so easy to bring the figure to life when you're very young. So it took me a long time to build up what's now known as
your role. You own it. Now, how many productions have you done?
9, I think.
9 productions.
And over 210 performances, I think.
Of the Empress. Yes. Mr. James King, Jimmy, how many times have you done it?
I think about 130 times. And many new productions. I think 7 new productions, but I've done, as near as I can figure now, in 12 different productions.
May I say something?
Please.
I made a big mistake. It was, of course, over 100, not 200.
Oh, I see.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't come
Then
at
it's
all.
not as impressive.
When he said it,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Miss Hesse, now,
Yeah.
you also have been quite associated with the role of the nurse.
Yeah.
How many productions of it have you done?
Productions, I didn't count it, but
Yes.
new productions, I did 9.
About 9.
Yeah, and I started with a very good teacher, with Carl Böhm.
Yes.
That was the first one, and after then I went to the Covent Garden Opera, and I did it with Sir Schulte, so I could...
You've had good beginnings.
Yeah, I had very good
Yes.
beginning. I have very good start with this part, even with this part.
And of course, we come to Madame Nilsson, our debutante, if I can just say about this opera.
I feel very young.
Yes. And you actually started the Dyer's Wife in '75.
Yes, I started in 75 in Stockholm with a very good teacher too. I sang with Klobuchar, the same conductor who conducts here.
Is it true? I was talking to Mrs. Klobuchar, and she said that at the beginning that you were not that interested in the role.
No, I wasn't interested because people said many said I should sing the Empress instead. And so I didn't know, and I wasn't too interested. And even one person, Kurt Herbert Adler in San Francisco, thought I should sing the nurse. So there were 3 roles to choose among. But I'm glad finally that I choose the Dyer's Wife, and I think Leonie was...
I'm happy she didn't sing the Kaiserin.
she convinced me also that the Dyer's Wife would be a very good role for me. But finally, when she heard me the first time, she said, "Well, I didn't expect you to be that good."
I feel, but I didn't.
And you told her that.
I know it's difficult the part to sing, you know.
Yeah.
Not for her,
But
obviously.
Because Miss Nilsson, you're always associated with such grand dames. You of the Brunhilde, all the goddesses and princesses, and all of these larger than life. And it must be a fascinating experience to do such a very normal human being like the Dyer's Wife.
Yes, it's wonderful. As you said, I have been wicked in one other way. That I have been running away with somebody else's head, you know, cut off, or spears, whatever.
Yeah,
and
came
this
down to
one
earth.
is just a very, very simple woman, and it's a lovely feeling.
It's a kind of a thing that can play on so many different levels. It plays
Sure.
on these fairy tale levels, but it plays on also on a very, very human level. But because
I think more the human level.
Ms. Rysanek, in your role as the Empress, of course, because you have the largest transformation than all the characters practically, because you really find humanity.
Yes, I think that's the beauty of the part, besides the singing.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it's so beautiful to sing. It's impressive.
Yeah.
I don't think it's beautiful. There's with few
yes.
exceptions.
Yes.
The prayer, I think it's lovely.
Yeah, but
I
your
didn't do
monologue before your final transformation at the end.
I don't think it's beautiful in the sense of bel canto beautiful.
I see.
I tried to sing as beautiful as possible with all those jumps
Yes.
up and down. But really beautiful phrasing she has, Barak has,
Those are
This
all,
is beautiful
yes,
music.
these are also, but I find at the same time, though, that magnificent, dramatic moment where
That's
you
it.
find the emperor turned in stone, and you have
That's
the
the
choice.
reward for the difficulties.
Difficulties, because then you have to finally make a decision.
And that's the beautiful thing in the
Because your
practice.
scream there reminds me of your scream as Sieglinde when Sigmund takes the sword off the tree.
I love to scream on stage.
Yeah.
If I can do it in the end, it's even better.
Yes, then after you finish
Don't know what
singing.
she's doing.
Yes.
Now, Jimmy, actually, your role, if you really want to take him on his surface, he can come out as rather a playboy. All you care about is
That's
hunting.
right. Yes, he is. His only function is to be a lover and a hunter, until he is really redeemed.
What is the difference?
Hunting and loving this goes together. You mean?
That's excellent.
I think this opera is absolutely one of the most beautiful stories of any opera in existence. Basically, I boil it down to one thing, and that is the triumph of sacrificial love, I think, through the Kaiserin. The Kaiser's turned to stone, let's see, but that's really a symbol. It's like anybody who is in some kind of a fix that he can't get out of, and somebody through their generosity or nobility or great love brings this person back into a normal situation. Really, the significance of the sacrificial love through the Kaiserin, she says, I will not see Barak and the fair Baron and the dyer's wife see their lives ruined out of a desire to make myself happy. And that's her nobility, which turns the whole thing upside down and brings this beautiful and happy ending to us.
Now we come, of course, to one of the most fascinating dramatic roles in the opera, the role of the nurse, because somebody called it actually Mephistophela, the female. Yeah, Mephisto, because Miss Hesse, you must find that as an exciting challenge.
Yeah, it is. It had so many colors in this part that it has love for the empress, and it had hate,
Yes.
Hate for the humans,
Yes.
yes.
Thorough hate.
and terrible hate, and so she is a person they had with many colors, many characters.
Also, the fact is that this role in all the fairy tales, there is a similar roles of the confidant, someone who accompanies the hero and the heroine and helps them in certain. But I must say that I feel an enormous affinity to this opera. I'm a Persian, and of course this comes from
Persia.
Yes, it comes from Persia.
Persian fairy tales.
And it has the Arabian, and it's a very,
Yes.
very strong Oriental form.
Yes,
to it.
yes.
And your role, I find, as the nurse, has
Yeah.
that very much of that Oriental
Yeah, that's right.
light to it. And I
Yeah.
find also your music, I think Strauss has added that exotic.
But
Yeah.
Amma is
It
the
is
word for
exotic.
Oriental word for nerd.
You also, in this particular production, I noticed that you do play it more as the very much of the Eastern.
Yes, a
Yeah.
spirit.
The Orient,
Yeah.
yes,
Yes, yes.
spirit, and even in your behavior and your
Yeah.
action, I find that.
Yeah.
Besides this being a fairy tale, I find it has an enormous lesson also for today.
It's,
for the
it's
people.
completely up to date.
That's it. I want
Maybe
to.
that's the
But you have to
success.
understand it.
Yes.
No, may I say something? I think the big success here in America about FRAU, and it's everywhere a big success. At the Met or here. And in the Met, it's absolutely a hit like here.
Yeah.
I think it's because people do not understand so well. They enjoy the
The
music
spectacle
and the spectacle
true.
much more, you know. If you understand the language, so you can be a little bit
Confused, you
You're
mean.
confused,
Yeah.
and you don't know really what's the meaning.
This poetry, his
Yes.
imagery is magnificent.
Yes.
When I have read the text, for example,
Yeah.
even the dialogue between Barak and his wife,
Yeah.
there is fantastic nuances.
Really?
yes.
Oh, yes.
He already says she is strange. I have to be careful. She's not only young, Dyer's wife. She's not like all the other housewives. She is
Housewives, yeah.
something special.
I had a talk with Rudolf Hartmann about this once. He said, basically, Jimmy, he said the opera is quite simple. But he said Hofmannsthal and Strauss, of course, amplified it into this great story, and they made it rather complicated. But, of course, all the great artworks are complicated, and there's always something new to find in them.
For example, in each couple, there is a very vital message. Because the humanity, let's say the couple, it's a form of the upstairs, downstairs. The upstairs with the empress and the emperor,
Yes.
that whole idea of humanity and the fact that you turn into a stone. There's a fantastic, leads to the transformation of the empress. Then you get down to the dyer and his wife. Every woman wants to have the husband to be strong. And I think when, for example, when you see your husband ready to kill you practically, you love him the most at that moment.
That's right.
Isn't that true?
That's
then
very
you
good.
see that he's
That's very
really,
good.
you know,
That-
he's
yes.
really interesting in her.
Well, I find that moment magical because the
Yeah.
minute you say, yes, hit me, because all
Kill
of a
me,
sudden,
yes,
yes,
kill me.
this is the man that you want your husband to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know the way he has
That's
acted
good.
all the time
Very good.
is that he says, well, I'm feeding you, you know, I'm feeding my brothers and everything. What else do you want? And that is so little that she thinks that he doesn't care for me. So that's why they are going apart. He doesn't care. He just maybe sometimes wants to go to bed with her, but that's all. She needs real love. The things she's saying, I go back to what you said, how difficult it is to understand. I have to go through the text almost every time I'm singing it because it is so difficult, and I have to repeat it and repeat it again what it means because it's so double and so symbolic.
Yes.
You know what she tells him. She tells him many, many, many fantastic things, but it's so hard. And if I don't know that myself, how would I, ask for
Communicate
that the
it.
public would understand me?
Because one
So-
of the problems I find in your role, for example, is that to make it very understandable to the public without making you unsympathetic, why don't you want to have children? Because since I think one of the points of the opera, which is very vital, that the function of a woman in the world is the continuity of a human being.
Well, who says she doesn't want to have children? It just have happened I haven't got any children. When she says, you know, we have been married now so many years, and I haven't got any children. Then finally, when the nurse comes and said, sell it to me, what do you call it? Here is it the shadow, but it really means
Fertility.
Yeah.
Fertility,
Fertility.
yes.
Sell it to me. Well, you know, I haven't got any children in 2 or 3 years, so I probably never get anything. And if I have something, I get all those jewelries, I get the gold and everything. Why don't I say? I get tempted because, you know, the dyer's wife is so poor and is living a such miserable life at the moment. So, you know, like many other women would maybe have done the same. At the last moment she discovers what she has, you know, and that,
Yes,
that
and
is,
then
you know.
what happens afterwards? Then you become angry at him because he still doesn't understand you.
What you have done.
Well, that is the moody woman.
Very
you
up to
know.
date.
Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful. How do you find that musically, for example, for the Kaiserin, for the Empress, for example? Do you find that Strauss has given you enough to get this conflict out that you have?
Yes. I think even a little bit too much sometimes.
Really?
It shoots like a rocket in the third act, you know?
Yes.
It's almost surprisingly for an audience who doesn't know the opera. She comes on in the beginning with a
Yes.
ridiculous serenetta-like piece for
There,
which I
yes.
have to vocalize for 2 hours, and then stands for almost 2 hours, does nothing, look and act a little bit, not too much. And suddenly she has to take the whole opera and make the figure, bring the figure to life, show the audience what happened now with her transformation and everything.
I always think the Empress is a little bit like Turandot.
Yes.
It's just that the transformation is much shorter in Turandot, that you never get a time to show her that she's a human being. But here is this.
Yeah.
But I think it is lovely to have the great part to sing at the end. I think it's worth to start, you know, come in from the dressing room and start, you know, like for instance, Turandot. I think that is very
Yes.
difficult.
They don't realize that these girls on stage, they're singing their heads off, but I'm singing backstage to keep my voice warm the whole evening. I sing practically a whole Tristan backstage in order to stay hot for the end, because the ending is really the most difficult.
There's a general knowledge, they say, that Richard Strauss did not like tenors, right? And he always wrote such gorgeous things for sopranos. But at the same time, your scene with the Falcon is
It's
music-
wonderful.
Yeah.
It's like Debussy in style. It's a bit impression.
He's one of the most sympathetic
Wonderful
barracks
Baroque.
I've seen.
He really is.
He has the right voice also for it.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And with you,
And
I
so
found
simple.
the scene between the two, where you
Beautiful.
finally come
It's
together,
ideal.
was not very touching.
I did my first Kaiser with his first Baroque in '64 in Berlin under Böhm.
Well, I just would like to say that I'm so grateful that I've had a chance to talk to you about this particular opera. FRAU and SCHATTEN for me is so special. And then to have, of course, Miss Rysanek, Miss Nilsson, Miss Hesse, and Mr. James King. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to a roundtable discussion with LEONIE RYSANEK, Birgit Nilsson, Ruth Hesse, and James King, moderated by stage director Lotfi Mansouri.
A year before I did a Jenůfa, and they asked me if I would be interested to do a Kostelnička. So I said, all right, I'll look through. So I found it very interesting, very beautiful to sing and wonderful
And in
to
what
act.
language did you sing?
Well, that's the funny story. I had to sing it, to learn it the first time in English.
You sang it later in Vienna in Germany and here now in San Francisco.
Yes, and then I had
Not
to...
in English.
No, not in English. This was the only time I sang it in English for Sydney, but I don't regret it. As difficult as it was wonderful to work there. Then I had to learn it in Czech, which of course, although I'm half Czech, my father is from Czechoslovakia, but he came as a child to Vienna, and he never spoke with us in Czech. This is a very, very difficult language because they have almost only consonants and no vowels. So it was very, very difficult, but finally it paid off.
This was here in San Francisco.
Yes.
Thinking of the different languages, which one would you prefer?
Absolutely in Czech.
Why?
Because it's the original language and that the music is so typical for the language. I thought, well, German is similar, or let's say easy. But I still sing, now I have learned it in German too. I sing now in 3 languages. I still think it's Czech. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and absolutely the right thing to do with the music.
Because it's written for this
Of course.
language.
That's what I said, yes.
Back to the part of the Kostelnička. What special interest did you find in this dramatic role?
Well, there are 1,000 things, 1,000 reasons to sing this part. It's a wonderful singing part. Strangely enough, when I heard it many, many years ago, and I was never offered Jenůfa, the part of Jenůfa, I mean, which I think would have been a right part for me 20 years ago. So I always saw great actresses, but seldom heard it very well sung. Please don't misunderstand me now. But they usually cast it here with a hochdramatische, or let's say in
You
their
mean in Germany
end,
and
yes, in
Vienna?
Germany and Vienna, the end of their career. And then it lacks a little bit the line of singing. So I still could make it, and it was absolutely fit for my voice. It was wonderful. The range was beautiful, and I gained, that's a nice thing about being older, I gained more in the low ranges than in the middle. So it's absolutely a beautiful singing part. And I think this was the big surprise when I started already in Sydney and then even more in San Francisco, because I really tried to sing it as good as possible.
Thinking of the different productions you sang, are there different interpretations of this character? For example, here in the production of Wolfgang Weber?
Well, not really. Not really. Of course, one can do it a little more rough and hard and even brutal. But I think altogether, I sang it now in 5 productions. I did a little bit different in Marseille, in France. This was very interesting, but not really a big change. I don't think there are certain things one cannot change.
It was not in French there.
No, it was in Czech too.
Please give us your idea about the character of this powerful part.
Well, there are people who say you are sometimes too soft, one suffers with you and one shouldn't because it's terrible what you are doing, meaning, of course, Kostelnička. But then I always have, of course, to do it my way. And it is, in my view, she isn't that horrible. Of course, she kills the little baby. But then, when she says in the 3rd act to Jenůfa, when she says, farewell, forgive me what I have done to you. Then she meant, of course, because I only thought of my proud, of my reputation I have here in the village. And she knew in the very end that she was absolutely wrong, that she thought more of the people than of herself or of Jenůfa.
A very emotional part.
Absolutely, absolutely, but a wonderful part.
Leonie Rysanek, the Kostelnička of this production, talking with her husband, Elu Gaussmann.
Maybe one Rhine maiden, one of the Valkyries. Oh, great, you are coming so early to Bayreuth. So I came to Bayreuth on stage. I sang my whole repertoire. Was of those days, it was very small. Operator, everything I sang. I sang the duet, center, Hollander, without Hollander. The man who accompanied me sang the Hollander. So I think I sang for 40 minutes. Then I said, that's it. I don't have any more numbers. I can sing Viennese songs if you want. No, thank you. You'll hear from us. So I said, oh my God, that's it. All right. So I went back in the hotel. The phone rang. Half an hour later. Here, Wieland Wagner. Well, Miss Rysanek, my wife and myself would like to have dinner with you tonight. I said to myself, dinner? At least you get a part. They would never give you a dinner and take you to dinner out if they don't engage me. So in those days, I smoked like crazy. I thought, it's very fashionable. I will be a big star. I smoke. I do like Caruso. Caruso was a big smoker. So I smoked and smoked and smoked. And we had dinner. And he talked nothing about engaging me. About Bayreuth, Richard Wagner, blah, 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 blah. And then suddenly he took my cigarette out of the mouth, extinguished the cigarette and said, my Sieglinde does not smoke. I screamed like yesterday's country. It was in a very famous Eule restaurant. So that's how I learned that I was his Sieglinde.
I've sung 299 performances of 24 roles over these 37 years. So you didn't want to do one more and make it 300?
I would, but I will not, because I made up my mind and I said, there has to be a point where it's finished. And I want to say goodbye to, especially here in New York, to America, which was absolutely my second home, when I still have voice enough and can be proud.
Let's get back to the role of center. You have done that, I guess, the most at the Met, more than 30 yes, times. Yes. But go back to that first night. What do you remember about that?
Well, I don't know, was it the first night when they applauded from the second, in the intermission, from the second to the third act, applauded through. I remember it never happened before, and never after, so they told me. And it was a complete surprise because, I did it very successfully with George London in Bayreuth. And I never forget the old Met, who had the staging, very old staging. And they told me it never was a big success here, Flying Dutchman. And George came to me up at the first rehearsal and said, we do our stuff from Bayreuth. Saying, be nice to him, but we did the duet like we did it in Bayreuth. And it was an unbelievable, I think it was even a bigger success than Macbeth. I think I was born to sing Santa and Empress. Those are two parts, and Sieglinde maybe.
And the Empress, you say?
Oh, yes.
You mean?
Oh, yes, the Empress and the FRAU. This is one of my favorite. Santa, Sieglinde, and Empress were the hardest to say for me goodbye, because I loved them so much. Of course, the Empress was a murderous part to sing.
What makes it so? The sustained power that you need through the evening?
Oh my God, it's a high coloratura soprano with a high D, which I in later years didn't sing, of course. I'm very honest. I transposed it to a B natural because it was murderous. I could do this the first 10 years I did it, with all the jumps over 2 or 3 octaves.
Mm-hmm. And
I loved it.
And you have the large orchestra, of course,
yes,
to contend with.
I love that. I love loud orchestra. I hate if they do Wagner now chamber music like. I can't stand it. It's not Wagner. I don't he meant it that way.
There is something more than just the singing. There is the fact that you put yourself into these roles.
There are a lot of great voices around now, young, beautiful voices. But what I miss is this absolutely give themselves, go to the utmost thing you can do. Give your heart, your blood, your thoughts, your love, your hate, everything, put into the part. That's so rare today. They're good voices, but singing alone is not it. Have to do different things. I did now four times, yes, the Queen of Spades, and there are a lot of crazy people who can each performance, you know. And they say, you do always a different, so I always do different things, but not on purpose. It's how I feel this evening. Do I feel more fragile? Do I feel more stronger? Do I feel angry? It depends how I feel.
So it's not so much learning a part or learning the dramatic values or studying something or planning something. It becomes part of you.
Yes. Everything I do is instinct. Maybe wrong sometimes, of course, but it's me. It's absolutely me. Of course, I try to follow the wish of the director or the conductor, but I still have to have my freedom to do certain things which came to me. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love to sing with people like George London. He smelled what I wanted to do. There was no big thing to talk. Do we this, you do this, and then I answer in this way. And those singers are very, very rare.
Did you find conductors who had that same quality for you?
Oh, yes. Even Böhm, who was a very strict man, but he always came for FRAU. You know, when I was a soprano, I was sitting for hours on the high notes, and each time he came to me and said, please, Leonie, please don't make a vacation on every high note up there. So I said, I promise. Once, of course I did. Then he comes on stage. I was like this. He says, well, you did it again. But it was so beautiful. Okay.
We are going to hear in a few moments the final scene from Salome with Karl Böhm conducting. And we haven't really talked about Strauss, except the Empress a little bit. This is, perhaps after Wagner, been the composer that whose roles have most...
Much more. Oh, Strauss was much more important than Wagner. Wagner singer, soprano is for me Isolde and Brünnhilde. But the biggest thing I ever did was Kundry. Mm-hmm. So I was the Jugendliche. I was the Italian spinto in German, you know, like Elsa and Elisabeth and Santa. I really was not a Wagnerian soprano, but I was a Strauss singer, yes.
We mentioned that the performance coming up here actually will be on January 2nd. It will be your American opera Farewell.
I don't want even to think of it because I'm sure I can't sing for this last evening because I will be overwhelmed by the farewell, you know. I love this house and they loved me. I always had the feeling when I sang here, even when I didn't sing well, they were always nice to me. They never did something bad to me, never ever. I never forget that. I never, and when I will be 100 years, I would never forget it, never.
You'll come back and talk to us about your retirement, and you're walking on the beach, and you will be going to concerts and reading and all those nice things.
I will come and listen.
With this remarkable achievement, Madame Rysanek crowns her association with the Metropolitan Opera, which began in 1959. To begin what I hope will bring back great memories from those 36 years, let me ask you about today's opera. In all the past performances of the Queen of Spades, I have never seen the Countess as such an active, acting participant in the action. How much of that was direction and how much came from Leonie Rysanek's vast storehouse of stage experience?
Thank you. Well, let's see at least half and half. He gave me good ideas and I brought, of course, since this is my third new production of this Queen of Spades, the coming up from under the floor, you know, this very scary appearance in the third act at the place of Hermann was his idea. Of course, I filled it a little bit up and say, then let me come as young. I think it's much more interesting have her come out as the young countess, as the Venus of Moscow, she was called. So, and let me give him like the kiss of death, which I think is a good idea.
That was your idea?
This was mine.
Wonderful.
And it worked. People said
It certainly did.
Unbelievable how it. I can't see it, but everybody says it's very good, very well done.
It was extremely effective, and it brings to mind a frequent reference to yourself as a singing actress. Now, singing actress is very often referred to people who, shall we say, charitably, act more than they sing.
Yes, that's why I don't like this word.
I don't like it either, but it never applied to you. Because I think for the right balance, I think you always regarded singing as topmost.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Acting must have come naturally to you.
I wanted to be an actress before I was a singer. I can't not forget that when I go on stage. But still, the first thing when I took on a new part, it's very important for me, is it for my voice? Is it good for my voice? Is it right for my voice? And so the first I have to look over the music. And then I look over the story. Is it good? Is it interesting? Is it boring? Like there's an opera I had to sing when I was very young, Agatha in FRAU, which I loved to sing, but I hated to act because it's such a bore and so difficult to do.
Agatha is beautiful to sing, but there is no dimension in the character.
Really, there's one line, very
That's right.
sweet, very blue-eyed and blonde hair.
Well, now, the other side of the coin is when there is too much intensity to be built into the role, and you become an exciting person. You become a Tosca, you become a Marschallin, you become Lady Macbeth, and you have all these dimensions. How to keep the balance?
This was always a big problem in all my career long. This was the fight. I knew when I went on stage, certain parts like Tosca, like Lady Macbeth, Santa, Sieglinde, all this with
High intensity.
figures. Yes, high intensity. I always said to myself, or my husband says, please keep it down, don't overact. But I didn't overact on purpose. It comes out of me, you know. I knew it was sometimes too much. And the danger was, of course, if I did too much, I heard my voice. So I screamed, maybe it's not the right word, but I oversang. I was a little bit sharp or flat or too much emotion, which is not so good. Real tears are killing the voice, of course, because it goes down your throat. And that's not the best for singing.
You know, I remember many years ago I read in Shaliapin's autobiography, and he said that whenever the person is on stage, there are actually two people, one who does the acting and the other who observes the person who's acting.
I heard this from Birgit Nilsson once in an interview. Someone quoted her. She said, when Birgit Nilsson goes on stage, there's always Birgit Nilsson next to Birgit Nilsson watching, which I never do. There's one thing I have learned now really thoroughly and understood. When I go on stage, in the first 2 minutes, I absolutely am in the part. I am the 90-year-old countess. This is not Katharina the Great. I have to bow. And I am this old, wacky, and very fragile woman. But I also must admit, when the curtain comes down, strangely enough, immediately, it's like I turn off a light when I take my bow. It's Leonie Rysanek who takes the bow. It's not the countess. I'm happy. This was always the best reward for me. The biggest check is not as wonderful as the laugh and the admiration of the audience. That I will miss the most.
Yes. Well, that brings me to my next question, because your career began in Austria. It had many very important early landmarks, such as your first appearance in Bayreuth, which was 1951, then Munich, and all this time you were singing in Vienna, and you came to the Met in 1959. Where do you place your Met Association in the overall picture?
Number one.
Well,
This house was my house. It still is my house and will always be as long as I'm alive. And I will come back and sit down outside in the audience, among the audience and the viewers, and I will enjoy it like I enjoy it now. When I don't want to think on the 2nd of January because it's the farewell, which is hard for me. Because I love this house, I love the city, and I love the people here. This is not a stupid compliment. Please believe me. This is because I had a fight with the Vienna people. They were really offended because I said that. I said, but that's the truth. I always said the truth. This is my, but Viennese. It has nothing to do with Vienna. I love Vienna. But New York is my house, the number one. I miss the most this house.
I have a list here. It says you have sung 24 roles in almost 300 performances. Which of all these roles was closest to you at the Met?
I must say it was, of course, Santa.
As far as the Flying Dutchman is concerned, Santa, it had a very nondescript history at the Metropolitan before you and George London took over those roles. It was not a favorite Wagner opera at all.
Yes.
And ever since that performance, that very memorable
I
production,
remember, when George told me we will do this in 60 at the Met, and we did it in 59 at Bayreuth, and it was a tremendous success there. So, but he said to me, but this was never a success there. So I said, we will make a success. I think, in former days, the cast, especially the center, the wrong sopranos. Of course, you have to have a voice,
Right.
it's size enough for center, but it also has to have this girlish sound.
Yes.
Still, this
Elsa sound.
Yes. Now you have better and younger singer, and
Right.
it's always a big success if you cast it right.
Yes.
But this was a special singer I never forget.
It really
never,
was.
Never ever forget.
It really was. So was your Sieglinde, and although I have a feeling that perhaps you would regard yourself more of a Richard Strauss interpreter than a Wagner interpreter, because you never did the heavy, murderous Wagner roles.
Now finally someone recognized that. Of course, I'm not a Wagner soprano. I never sang the Brünnhildes, with one exception. In the first year, I sang Walküre Brünnhilde in Innsbruck, but never ever again. So I was the Jugendliche, but I was never Brünnhilde, never Isolde. And you
Yes,
are
sir.
Wagnerian soprano if you sing Brünnhilde and Isolde. The most heaviest part I sang was Kundry.
Let us talk to Strauss for a moment, because that's where you really shone, and I think that he more or less invented those very high soprano part for your kind of voice.
So his son said, after my first
He
solo
did.
in Munich, he said, my father must have dreamed of soprano like you are.
Let me talk about Salome and Electra. Is Electra the toughest of all?
Well, I can't tell because, first of all, Böhm was already very, very ill when we did it. I was like this when we did the studio, the tape for the movie.
Yes.
So then Fischer Disco, who sang Orestes, did not show up. So I had to sing without Orestes. Fortunately, I knew the opera very well, so I learned it very well. But still, it's difficult to sing it without a partner, The emotion is not the same.
Among the roles that you sang in Europe, but not at the Met, a remarkable exception is Turandot. And I suppose the size of the Met had something to do with
No.
it. No?
Nothing at all.
Really?
I sang it the last time. I sang it in 57, I think it was 57, in Los Angeles with the San Francisco Opera. And I got a standing ovation after the riddle scene. I never forget that. And then the famous critic, I think he's still alive, he's a very, very old man, Goldberg.
Yes, Albert
I
Goldberg.
think he's still
Yes.
alive.
Yes.
In those days, I didn't read, understood English, very little, school English, very, very few words. And someone read to me the review, raving. And then came the word, but. The word but is always
You hate butts.
but. So he, at the very end, he wrote, I'll never ever want to hear this wonderful, beautiful voice again in this horrible part.
Oh,
So I really took it serious, these critics, So I never touched it.
yes.
And I must admit, Pink often asked me to do it, but I was always Birgit, And,
Yes.
and I always said to myself, well, I'm different. I would do it different, of course. But still, she is soaring over there.
Yes.
And my voice is a darker, softer voice, so I'm not sure it would be the same effect here in the house. And I was coward. Be very honest.
Well, as I mentioned before, in this respect, it was something quite unusual that you excelled in so many Italian roles, and we could never tell anyone that Leonie Rysanek is a German soprano, because then we would have to ignore the Toscas and the Macbeths and the Ballos,
Yes.
and you even did Nabucco, which the Met only staged once.
Yes. If you don't have a great Abigail,
Yes,
you cannot do it. It's a very difficult opera.
it's another murderous
Very, very,
part.
very
Yes.
And a lot of singers keep away